Let's start with the elephant in the room. There was a bit of an incident at the final whistle for the Gyeongin Derby. Incheon 1, FC Seoul 2. Some plastic water bottles were thrown from the stand towards the pitch. It's been a bit of a hoo-ha. Luke, can you summarize basically what happened, what's been said, and what action so far at the time of recording has been taken?
Right, so at the final whistle, it came just after an Incheon corner. Seoul cleared the ball, and a shot came back in. The ball went over the bar, and the final whistle was blown. Now, all of the players were congregated up in the goal area in front of the home fans. And as the final whistle went, the Seoul goalkeeper, Paek Chong-bom, he celebrated with his defenders and immediately turned around and fist pumped the Incheon fans quite a lot more than you perhaps would regularly see. Now, he said that it's as a result of people booing him and shouting obscenities at him. But after he did that, there were a few water bottles thrown, and then as more players have come and tried to tell people to stop throwing, it's had the opposite effect and ended up encouraging a lot of water bottles to be thrown. I'm not sure if anybody beyond Ki Sung-young was hit. I know there's a video of him getting hit in a delicate place. But beyond that, I don't know of anybody else getting hit. The referee was trying to restore order as people were fighting and disagreeing over whose job it was to calm the fans down, and all the time the bottles are on the pitch. We'll talk about it and opinions of it shortly. The current situation is that Incheon have asked anybody who did throw a bottle to voluntarily report themselves to the club. As of the last count I saw, it was 75 people have acknowledged their part in it. There's been a lot of talk on the forums of people trying to identify each other and create situations where people can't not admit to what they've done. All of the supporters groups have taken turns to apologize to the fans in the stadium for what's happened, with quite long promises of reflection and things like that. Incheon have closed the home end, the S section, the standing section. The whole south stand is closed for the next two games, which is Gwangju at home a week on Saturday and Ulsan the following midweek. So season ticket holders will be moved to the side. So fans are still in, but there's going to be no cheering section. There's also rules being brought back in, which is no bottle lids, which was a thing for a long time anyway. No cans are allowed anymore for the remainder of the season. And any banners or flags that people want to bring in have to be pre-screened by the club. So I'm not sure if that's related to something else or preemptively kind of protecting the club from any protests. The league is going to announce its own punishments tomorrow.
Right. And how many did you throw?
I wish I had strong enough arms to reach the pitch from where I sit. No, I'm joking. Obviously, I should probably say that. Start with that. No, I'm joking.
Joking.
No, and it's one of those where it was all of the people right at the front. Because of how steep the banks are, people are quite far back once you get outside of the standing section. So it was the standing area that was throwing them. One of my students has a season ticket in the standing area, and I asked him, did you see anybody throwing them? And he told me it was like the people throwing them near him were middle school and high school kids, which kind of fits the profile of the discussions that have been on the forums. Okay. Younger members kind of trying to impress older members of supporters groups.
One question I would have is why were there so many semi-full water bottles there at the ready? Like, it's the end of the game. If you had a bottle of water, you probably would have drank all of it by now. Why were there so many?
I think it because people didn't drink them. Often in Incheon, like there's quite a long queue, and especially like there was 15,000 people there on Saturday, I think 14.5, and they have 2 kiosks at best open. So at halftime, people go and they buy 2 or 3 bottles, and then they stand at the front and they jump up and down and sing. And so they bring enough water to have water throughout the game, despite it raining and everything else. I mean, it is quite common to see people with multiple bottles. I think the fan groups actually bring in like 24 packs to give out to their members as well when the weather gets a bit warmer. And given that they don't really sell much else other than beer and water, it's not surprising that it was water bottles. But perhaps that also indicates that it's people who aren't old enough to buy beer cans.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to play a clip, and then we're going to, I suppose, all wade in and sort of say what we think about the situation, and perhaps, I don't know, think about what might the punishment be and what it ought to be, and that kind of thing. So let me just play this. We'll see how this works. So there we go. That's that. I will say just first of all what Kim Hoon-gi, who is, I think, is the chairman of the Korea Professional Footballers Association, has said. There's a statement released, and he said the use of violence against players on the pitch is simply unacceptable. Are ordinary workers being abused in their workplace? Moreover, Ki Sung-young was hit by a water bottle. This is a very serious situation. Cooperation between the K-League and each club is needed on verbal and physical violence against the players. So they've obviously, as you would expect, that association, the players have been very sort of strong in voicing what they think about the situation. Matthew, I'm going to ask you first because you're on the screen. You're the one right next to me. What do you think about all this? What do you think could happen? What should happen? Was the reaction justified?
I mean, reaction from the bottles. No, I mean, as an adult, I just a sole goalkeeper isn't on the high on my list of people I would throw a water bottle at in just life. Like so. But I mean, we shouldn't be throwing water bottles. We shouldn't be throwing anything at players, really. Nothing should really be going. And I know you can say that he's fist bumped the crowd, but I know we're not saying that is justification for it anyway. But there can be no justification. He is just a goalkeeper. His team's won in a derby. It sounds like he's been getting some stick. It happens. He's turned around, giving a bit of stick back. I can understand on one hand why people go, oh no, he's cheered the bastard. But sorry, but yeah, it's like you shouldn't be throwing it. But the thing is, the bigger concern for me is just like how the actions that will be taken afterwards because of this. Because K-League, I know it doesn't have a lot going for it sometimes on the pitch. We all bemoan so many things like, oh, this decision is wrong this week. Oh, this team is not performing well. And there's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of good things with K-League, and being able to bring in your refreshments, being able to bring in food, being able to bring in drink, being able to watch the game as civilized adults, enjoy it, is one of the perks in this league. I don't want to be going the way of the Premier League where we can't have a beer facing the pitch because we can't trust it because a few people got upset a goalkeeper shook his fist in joy, So in that sense, it annoys me because, and again, I know it's not, I can't say Incheon fans because I know it's not Incheon fans. I know you're Luke, I know it wasn't you either, but what I'm saying is a small minority has the chance to ruin it for the whole league, because if the league thinks, oh, this is a big issue, it would be a whole league ban. Now, what I do think Incheon have acted swiftly. I think Incheon have tried to probably preempt the league in punishment. Incheon are going to get a fine. There's going to be a fine. The worry would be if they have a stadium closure or anything like this. Now, I think by closing the stand, Incheon have already made the right steps for the next 2 games. I think they've done well there. I think asking people to come forward, this is always a bit difficult because it's like those people do need to, probably be identified. So perhaps by saying come forward, there is that element. I don't like what's going on the forums with people identifying and throwing each other on. That's for maybe the Incheon supporters to decide on. I can't really judge on that one, but I think maybe Incheon's preemptive action here. I think as well, people have all said the right things after the match. This is rightly being condemned. I know the goalkeeper also apologized as well after the match. How much he needs to apologize, I don't really know, because he shouldn't have to apologize is what I'm going to say. Shouldn't have to apologize. But I also understand, in Korea, the goalkeepers there's usually a bit of like mutual respect between the goalkeepers and the away fans. They'll do the clap when they come over at the beginning of the match, and then they'll clap and bow and walk off. So this behavior as well is not normal, but also, I don't think he needs to apologize for the water bottles or anything like that. I don't think it's, he needs to leave that at the door. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm going all a bit around here, but I think just to summarize, I think Incheon have acted swiftly. I think Incheon are probably making the right steps to try and preempt the K-League. K-League are going to issue something. They have to be seen to be doing something as well. Understandably, I just hope that, I hope that this doesn't spawn into something that goes league-wide, because I think this is one of the few joys we get from watching K-League. We're saying this is a podcast that promotes the league, and I know that's a bit harsh because there are lots of other joys we have watching it on the pitch and things, but week in, week out, regardless of results, being able to go to games, being able to be trusted to act responsibly in the stands, it's a nice perk. So I don't, the average football fan or the average passerby, the average person with a passing interest in football here sees those videos on the news and thinks this is like every game, because those people still think Lee Kang-in is scum. The people who only have a passing interest in football will see this and just assume, well, that's all the games here, we're not going. And K-League is on the up in terms of attendances. So, as well, we've just got to have a bit of concern there. I don't know. I think punishments are being handed out. It's obviously despicable to be throwing like that, throwing any water bottles on the pitch, throwing any projectiles on the pitch. But yeah, I by the sounds of what Luke's saying as well, it just seems like, as you said, Luke, maybe if it was youth kind of as well throwing it, there's a bit of naivety there, but that's not to ignore it either. But yeah, I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Yeah, Luke, anything to respond to that?
The self-reporting, I don't think I mentioned. The club basically said that if you admit to what you've done, you're only subject to the club's punishment. Whereas if you're identified afterwards and you didn't report yourself, I think it's civil and criminal responsibility as well. So as a way of getting people to come forward without the threat of serious trouble, they're saying you will be protected from criminal civil liability if you admit that you threw something on the pitch.
But surely, if the police wanted to look at the cameras, they would be able to. Incheon can't stop them from then, if they wanted to investigate. No. They can't say, "Oh yeah, but that one there, he's come forward, so you can't prosecute him." You know what I mean?
Perhaps, but I suppose it depends what the law is specifically that they've broken. Yeah. Now, the only person who we know that got hit was Ki Sung-yeon. So the only person who's physically assaulted somebody would be the person who's thrown that bottle. So if that person's identified and they don't come forward, they could be in a lot of trouble. Whereas the act of simply throwing a bottle, whilst possibly a public order offence in England, or there'd be something that you would be in trouble for, it's perhaps not to the lengths of criminal proceedings. True. I'm not up on Korean law. I don't know how it would work, but there has to be perhaps. The police don't want to be dealing with arresting people for throwing a water bottle.
No, they don't.
Maybe. I said to somebody the other day, it could just be a bluff as a way to get people to come forward. Because if people are nervous that they've overreacted after the game and they've been like worrying, oh God, am I going to go to jail? Then maybe this would push them to come forward. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Andrew, what's your take on all this then? Obviously, Matthew said what he said.
Yeah, I'm like whatever Matthew said, I was going to say the same thing, because it's funny because yourself, myself, and Luke were sitting here in the podcast last week, and we did the behind closed door session, and we talked about what makes K-League football, in some cases way better than the football we watch back home, or what would we like to implement in England and Ireland that we have in Korea. And how much of that conversation was related around having a drink at your seat. We talked about that so much, the camaraderie, or like the lack of aggro outside the stadium on the match day, where you have both sets of supporters mingling at the food trucks together. They are segregated inside the stadium, but you can still enjoy a bunch of beers, and watch your team play. And it's just it's so frustrating that this happened so soon after we last had a recording on this podcast. Like you wouldn't have imagined that what we saw in Incheon would have exploded the way it did. And therefore, I'm also really worrying about the repercussions from this, and that the league might say. I just think when it comes to football as well, even in different parts of the world, like we watch football in Korea very differently than we might watch it in Poland or Russia, Turkey, a lot of other places. But there just seems to be like a stigma of football fans that generally they're not able to behave, and that's why we must have this segregation. We must have loads of blocks between them. But football doesn't encourage this. It's just, and I don't think in Korea it does either. Just people like watching football, and some people like watching baseball, but just because they like watching football, it doesn't mean it's scumbags. Like I just really think this is one isolated incident, and Incheon, as both of all you guys have reacted quickly. I like the idea that they've closed that stand for the next 2 games. I just think it should end there, and there doesn't need to go any further than this. But I too be really concerned about the knock-on effect in the rest of the league. I wonder how much the other clubs would push back in that, though, because whilst attendances might be up, a lot of clubs are struggling for attendances. And if you found out now that you couldn't go and have chicken and beer at a game, that might drive more and more people away. And I wonder what sort of a knock-on effect that would have. As for what happened on the day, yeah, I mean, I just think it's a rivalry. Fans give stick to players from the opposition team. I think they're fully entitled to celebrate in front of the opposition fans. And that was like a split-second stuff. Like, it was only a couple of minutes. I don't think what he did deserved the reaction that it got. And I also agree that he didn't need to apologize for it. So obviously nobody was hurt. I don't know what happened to Ki Sung-young. I saw him lying on the ground, but obviously nobody was hurt. I hope we can just move on from this, and we don't need to tar football fans all over the country as being scumbags and hooligans when they're not. They're just there to enjoy their football. But it would be utterly devastating to find out that from June the 1st, you had to have a drink in the concourse of a K-League game from now on. I think that would be massive problem for all the clubs across the country.
I think it might there might be a case of it might take longer for you to get into stadiums now as well. I think they're going to have to. They might do bag checks that are a bit more thorough. And like I went to a Dejon game a few weeks ago on a Tuesday night, and a friend that I was with had brought a few Heineken Zeros in, just in a bag, and he had no cup, and they were really obsessed about the fact that he needed to have a cup to sort of decant this. And I was like, well, it's not alcohol. It's like, yeah, no, it's not about the alcohol. It's the fact that it's a can and it's heavy, and it could be used as a weapon. It's like, and they wouldn't let us go in until one of us had gone to the convenience store and got a cup, and then come back and then poured it in and stuff. So it was. We might see more of this now. Certainly will, I think, for the foreseeable future. I just think I do think there will be new rules set for the league. I think I saw something online in the last few days that suggested that could happen. Let's hope not. And I also agree with what you said as well, that what Baekjeonbom did not warrant bottles being thrown at him. In my opinion, he's well within his rights in the last minute of a derby game, the last seconds, to celebrate the win. If what he's saying is true, where he's been abused from the fans and things being said about his parents, then of course it's going to react that way. If the fans are going to say stuff about the players are going to react. And likewise, if the player reacts like that, then you just shout more abuse at him. That would be the right reaction.
I was going to say, even if that part of it, he hadn't said that, like one of the things we love about sport, any sport, is just the emotion of seeing players celebrating they won a derby game away from home, brutal conditions on the pitch, obviously a hostile partisan crowd. This is what you love about sport. And to think that we can't have players. Now you might say he doesn't need to turn around to the home fans and do it, but I think as people who love sports, there's some of the things that we really love, and you love to see your players doing that. You love to see that celebration as well, what it means to him, what it means to his teammates. And just one other thing for me, because I'll be at that Ulsan game at the second part of that closure. I'll be there for the media side of that, and like it's definitely going to detract a lot from the game, because when I was at those Asian Champions League games, you'd have the away fans on your left and you had the Incheon fans in the south stand on the right, and the noise from both sides of the stand was amazing. And it's a midweek game. I don't know what sort of noise Ulsan are going to bring with them, but the fact that south stand to your right as you're sitting in the media section is going to be closed, like it's going to have a knock-on effect. And I think that things like that are going to really hurt Incheon, even just for 2 games. So I hope that that's the extent of it, and it just somebody does talk about a stadium closure. I think is completely off the charts. So like banning fans from behind the goal for 2 games seems fair punishment, in my opinion.
Yeah, Luke, anything to add?
I'm not sure what it's like with each of your teams, but like, do Daejeon, Jeonbuk, Suwon, do they have individual supporters groups within?
Yeah, there's quite a lot.
Yeah, I think actually I wanted to bring that, but I don't want to kind of detract from that part of the discussion. But yeah, I was going to say, like, there are multiple supporter groups now within Jeonbuk. In fact, it's kind of fragmented in the last 6-7 years as well. It seemed to be a lot more united back in 2015, 16, and then 17, and then suddenly another one pops up because 2 people have had a row in the ultras group. So it's like, oh well, we have to have another one now, and we have to have another one now. And Suwon Blue Wings was notorious for it because the ultras group, they all hate each other.
Because I do wonder how much of the.
I think what I was going to say is there are some group. I'm not saying this is the reason here. So this is why I wanted to kind of separate it from this. But if we are separating it from this chat, let's just make it clear now. I'm separating it from this chat. But there are some groups that spend a lot of time trying to get what they deem as authenticity. What they have perceived as authenticity as an ultras group. Whether that's some groups in certain clubs who've decided to wear balaclavas, which has happened in the past. Some groups take it very seriously, thinking we need to. We're the real deal. Look at us. We've got the word ultra or something in us. So it's like, yeah. But I don't want.
I was going to say similar. Yeah. I think, and I don't necessarily think it's just an Incheon thing. I think there's a lot of people who want to be members of a lot of specific individual supporters clubs who care more about their own little supporters group being noticed than perhaps supporting the team that they're supposed to see and support. And they spend a lot of time on TikTok and a lot of time on YouTube and a lot of time on Twitter and Instagram watching these videos about what it is to be an ultra. And there is kind of, that desire for acknowledgement and authenticity. You look around the banners in the Incheon end for a start, none of them actually say Incheon. They all say the individual names of their supporters groups. And some of those supporters groups have been known to cause problems in the past. Last year, there was a bottle thrown incident, which I'm not sure if you're aware of at Incheon. One of the members of a supporters group threw a bottle at Joseon Hwan after we'd lost a game, and we'd been on a mini run where we'd not won many games, and he came over to bow at the end of the game and acknowledge that things weren't going great. Somebody threw a bottle at him, which you throwing a bottle at your own manager, it's brain dead. Anyway, but their punishment was that they would ban for the remainder of the season And if they broke that ban, if they were found in the stadium, then they would be pursued again criminally and civilly. So those people are back in the ground this year.
I mean, I don't want to point fingers or anything, but yeah,
don't
what
know.
I will say is I kind of just don't understand the fragment. I mean, there are some supporters groups that just do nice things. They go off, they have nice little weekends away, Samgyeopsal, everything. You see all those nice pictures in the group, and I think there is kind of a benefit as well. Like, you know, these kind of groups where it's clearly good for people, young people trying to enjoy things together and make friends and stuff. But there are some where it is kind of, you're not supporting hard enough, look at me kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everybody's in the stadium for the same reason, you know.
Yeah.
Well, they should be in the stadium for the same reason.
Yeah. Well, let's draw a line under this now and move on. But Luke, what in your opinion is good? It is a fair punishment. Just a fine, because like Matthew said, and we've already said that they have closed the S stand for 2 games, kind of hoping that if the league see that, they'll think, okay, well, they've done that, let's just give them a fine. Is that fair?
What I actually have written down on my notes is that any punishment we're given, I don't think we can necessarily complain about. And that's not to say that I think we deserve strict or lenient punishment. I think what Incheon has done so far is probably the most that they can physically do to this point, knowing that the league is going to get involved at some stage. Tomorrow we find out what the punishment is. If it's a fine, as it was when we ran on the pitch after the end of the season in 2016, I think it was 2017, the supporters crowdfunded to pay that fine. If it's a fine, I imagine that might happen again and the fans will try and dig into their pockets. If it's further closures, if it's closure of the ground, I don't know when they'd do it, because obviously, like this was brought up to me today, like Gwangju fans will have booked their train tickets already. Ulsan fans may have booked transport tickets for next week. So if they decide to close it for a game, which games will they close it for?
Yeah.
I think closing the entire ground would be tricky, especially if Incheon fans are then allowed to go to away games anyway.
Yeah.
I think I'm worried that Korea tends to overreact to certain things, and that they might look to make an example out of us to prevent this from happening again anywhere else. I think what we've done so far, plus a fine, I think that would be a fair outcome.
Yeah.
There'll definitely be a fine. I think full closure would be rough. I saw somebody suggest a points deduction, which is ridiculous.
No chance.
Given, it's
The
people
other thing as well is
take advantage.
I was going to say, like, it's not a unique situation. Like all over the world, like I'd imagine there are tons and tons of examples of something similar to this that they could just lean upon and make like an informed, a proper decision on. Like, it's not like this has never happened anywhere else before. So it's been done in many other countries. Things like this have happened, and they will have been able to read upon what punishments were handed out. So you'd like to think that they would at least keep that into consideration and not just do something that's completely outlandish or completely uncalled for.
Yeah.
I'm just grateful that it stopped with bottles rather than people trying to get onto the pitch, because that would have been a much worse situation.